Thanks, Dee.
My name is Chandler Bachman. I was also in a boating accident. I was the one you saw in the video. And I am an amputee at the hip. I'm a hip disarticulate. And I am a junior at Issaquah High School and have plans to become a doctor if all goes well.
Hey, Matt?
My name is Matt Waters. I was wounded in Iraq 4 years ago. It'll be June 11, 2003 is when I lost my leg to a rocket propelled grenade, which is a shoulder-fired rocket used to take out tanks. He decided to try to shoot me with it, and I returned the favor. It's been, thanks. It's been a hard road to hoe, but you know, a couple years ago I went on with the Tacoma Police Department. They hired me, and I've been there for 3 years now, and love every minute of it. You know, I dropped one gun, I picked up another, so I'm out there helping protect you guys. There's a lot of us, so that's where I sit right now.
Thanks, Matt. So you can see that we try to provide a sort of a balance of people that have really come from many, many different backgrounds, experiences, to kind of enable you to ask the questions that you'd like to ask. So at this point, let's see if we have some questions. Both Danny and I have some questions because I'm interested to learn more, but let's go ahead and have you participate.
There's microphones, if you could please go to those that are in the aisles.
Everybody shy this evening? Here we go. Always take somebody to start it off. Thank you.
I had a question regarding the group decision-making process, and with respect to if a patient is a minor, how much decision he or she has, as well as their parent?
That's a good question. Probably you weren't in too much shape to kind of help out with the decision making, I'd imagine, at that time. Doug, you probably knew more about the acute situation at that point. And
yeah, I think that like a lot of things in trauma, the informed consent process is very different than when something's elective. I think our first obligation of physicians is to keep people alive and to save as much function as we can. But we obviously work a lot with families, and typically those decisions go to parents of minors. But if it's a slower decision process, I am very conscientious of making sure that the young person is very involved. Obviously, I would never do something to someone that's against their will, so it's building consensus and information and getting everybody on board. I think one of the hardest we face is a lot of cancers in the limbs. An osteosarcoma happen to very young people, often 10, 12, 13 years old. And so we're facing sometimes discussions about limb loss with young teenagers and their parents. So that's the one that comes to mind the most. And Dee actually has been involved in that process of young people reaching those decisions. I don't know if you have comments on building consensus with families for a very difficult decision, Dee?
I agree with you. I think it's a team approach. I will say it's probably one of the hardest decisions that a parent ever is called on to make, because they're always, concerned about having to make that decision for their child. If their child is not responsive, if they're, unconscious at that point, or if their child is quite young. So a lot of times they will stall as long as they can because they do want the child to be alert to what's going on. But any of you that are parents, it's agonizing to have to step in and feel like you're making an irreversible decision like that. So you do try and incorporate the child as much as possible.
I'd like to ask each of you to maybe sequentially sort of, I'm always interested in what you view as the greatest challenge and adaptation to becoming an amputee. And maybe if you could just give each of your personal perspectives on that.
Well,
my leg was amputated when I was 21, so I was at that critical, one of the many critical life stages that we go through of defining who we are as, to our communities and who we are to one another, to ourselves personally. And the biggest challenge that I felt that I had, and still to this day have, is not the loss of a limb, but the loss of the spontaneity that a whole physical body provides you. So where someone, I remember very clearly in college wanting to go out with my girlfriends after studies and go to a movie, go to a party, go have pizza or what have you. I had to make several decisions aside from that, saying, can I physically endure that? Will tomorrow be too much of a hassle for me to endure that? So the loss of spontaneity is probably the biggest challenge for me.
I think the hardest part was the first 2 years on it. Is just you have to readjust yourself. The human body is an amazing thing, but you've got to learn how to walk again. You're a baby, and every step you take, you have the potential to fall down and hurt yourself very bad. The rehab programs that they have do a marvelous job. I stumbled down 27 stairs and due to the training that I got out of rehab, I didn't break anything, and it was just amazing on it. And along with this, with diabetes, if you have it at one time or the other, you're going to get depressed. And they have some very good programs that help in this. I know when it's coming on, I just kind of withdraw for a day and stay away from everybody, because I can't even stand myself on those days. But as I say, life is good.
Thank you. Dee?
Boy, I really hear what they're saying. When she talks about the spontaneity, I had a patient say once, I can do what I did before, but I have to think about it first. And there is something very real about that. I believe that as a nurse with a focus on psychosocial issues, that just kind of getting that sense of who you are, your identity, and getting through some time of grief about losing something so precious as a part of your body. I think sometimes in our country there's a fault with saying, hey, you'll be okay, just buck up, hang in there, be strong. And it's kind of like saying you don't have the privilege of sitting down and feeling rotten about something very rotten that's happened to you. And sometimes that makes it harder down the road when all the multiple things that we encounter happen, the things that are slowed down, the things that are a major nuisance in your life, the relationships that you're questioning, you're wondering about. I feel like sometimes that's a big barrier, and I was grateful that I allowed myself some grief time, but I wasn't good at doing it in front of people. So I'd do that privately, and then I could keep a smile going and keep moving forward. But I think that's one thing to keep in mind, that people need the privilege of having some downtime.
Hardest thing for me, my accident's pretty unique, pretty unusual. And for me, I have a lot of pelvic discomfort, so sitting and walking is hard because I'm bearing weight through my pelvis. But I walk slower, and I don't always keep up with my friends, but my peers are great about it. But the hardest thing is constant discomfort, and knowing that I probably won't run for a long, long time, but I may. But just making the adjustment was okay though, because I stayed positive. I just decided to be positive because there's no use in trying and not trying to be.
Thanks. Matt, how about you?
Biggest challenges are extension cords and Christmas tree lights, to be honest. When you're walking through the garage, they get me all the time. There's been a few times I've fallen flat on my face, and you swear at yourself, and like everyone else is saying, you want to buck up and tell yourself you're all right. And I portrayed that to several of my buddies when I was still in the hospital. In fact, on the same mission I got shot, one of my buddies had been shot through the hand, and he came up to see me, and his face was white, and I kept telling him, hey, I'm fine. And you put on this show for everyone else, but inside, your mental state is still it was way too early for me to be telling people I was all right. I said, hey, what you see is what you get. I am jacked up. Get used to it. But as far as me, I was blown up. The stuff that I have to deal with, a lot of stuff is after the fact and stuff that I have to deal with the rest of my life. Just like he was saying, each one is unique. Each one has to deal with something different. In my case, it's shrapnel or foreign bodies inside my residual limb. Dr. Smith pulled a stone out of me last year, but about this time, and a couple pieces of shrapnel. So, each one's different, and that's, for a lot of the traumatic amputees coming from Afghanistan, Iraq, you're dealing with, not only these limbs being ripped from your body, but things being ejected up in there, or not ejected, but thrown up in there. So.
Do we have any questions? Yes, thank you.
I heard that after a certain time, people with prosthetic legs, they could feel it. So I was wondering first if it was true, and also if they can feel it, what kind of sensation they get from it.
Well, for me, I can predict more now. I can sort of predict where my foot's going to end up in space, and to an extent, assume certain things that I couldn't before. But I certainly can't feel my foot in space. And one way you can, I feel like amputees can hide pretty well in communities with the aesthetics, with the physical therapy that's available today. I think people can really assimilate with their communities really nicely. But the one trick that I've always seen, I don't know if you guys do, I always look, if somebody's constantly looking at the ground with every foot placement, I'm assuming they're probably an amputee, because we're constantly evaluating the ground beneath us and looking for the safe space to put our foot for those of us that are missing our lower limbs.
I think the hardest thing is overcoming your pride. You've got to accept what's happened to you, and it's very difficult to do, especially that first year. You get into the self-pity stage, and fortunately I was blessed with 5 friends very close around me that pulled me through it. I might not have made it without them. But with the neuropathy on this right leg, it makes things very interesting. Ideally, everything is ground level. There's no stairs, no steps, no nothing. Stairs give me more fits than anything else, that and the shower.
Well, I agree that you do need to keep your eyes on that floor ahead of you. Just a little twig, a little pebble, a little unevenness in the sidewalk. If you're on a predictable floor, you're okay. But you get off of it, and you better keep your eyes open. And kind of like the Christmas tree wires and whatever. I mean, I can do really good in a lit room, especially with a predictable floor. But you put me out in the backyard at night without a flashlight, and I'm working at it to stay up, because I can't see those little divots that I better, counteract my body with. So I can do pretty well in the daylight.
For me, like feeling, as for like phantom pain, I think phantom pain is much different for everyone. I'm a pretty new amputee, so I'm still experiencing some, and it may persist and it may go away. But while I'm walking, sometimes I'll feel my phantom leg actually dragging behind me, like I'm tripping on something. But really, it's not, nothing's there. And phantom sensation is interesting. You get phantom itches, tickles. I mean, everything. It's really interesting. But when I take my leg off every day, I can kind of feel a little heightened phantom sensation.
As far as hitting or missing the ground, I had my prosthetist build me that it actually helps me out quite a bit. He integrated a knee brace into my socket, which comes up